The Trump regime's negotiating ploy in Islamabad, Pakistan with Iran was a complete disaster. The Trump regime showed up and they tried to change the 10-point negotiating framework that they previously agreed to with Iran. Iran said, no, we're sticking with the framework you previously agreed to. And then the Trump regime basically said, if you don't agree to our demands, we're going to kill all of your negotiators. And how did they do that? During the mediation in Islamabad, they planted a story in the Washington Post, which basically suggested killing the negotiators. Also, Donald Trump made a social media post saying the only reason we're keeping these negotiators alive is so that they can negotiate and give up. And the Iranian negotiators, who were the top leaders within Iran, said, well, your threats don't intimidate us. We showed what we can do during this war, and we could strangle the global economy if we want to, and especially the United States economy, and we'll help our allies and destroy the United States and their allies. And so it ended. You see J.D. Vance leaving Islamabad. You see him going up the stairs of the airplane and going on Air Force Two and leaving. And then Donald Trump started posting additional threats, saying that he was going to now start a blockade of the Persian Gulf generally, and that the ultimate trump card is using the USS Gerald Ford to run a blockade of Iran. And I guess the thinking is you will use the United States military to attack the allies of Iran that are being given permission to utilize the Strait of Hormuz. So what happens when the Chinese tanker goes by? It's great work, Donald. You have just destroyed America's post-World War II kind of power structure that existed, and you've also made us just weaker at home and abroad, and basically are crashing our economy. So you have in Iran, in Pakistan, you have these disastrous negotiations that are taking place because Trump changes the framework. So during the negotiations, the U.S. and Iran, they're in Pakistan, they're in Islamabad, right? They're having these negotiations. Then it's reported that the United States is sending 2 destroyers into the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran sends a naval vessel, identifies these destroyers and says, turn around. Turn around. So the U.S. removes its destroyers and never really gets into the Strait of Hormuz. But then the Trump regime and CENTCOM pretend it happened. They're like, we successfully sent 2 destroyers that went east and west, and they fixed all of the mines, and they did a mine sweeping operation. It's like, that didn't happen. Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, others, reporting, that didn't happen. What happened was the destroyers showed up. They were confronted by Iranian ships. The U.S. destroyers turn around and they head back. First off, how embarrassing is that? Let me just remind you what J.D. Vance said before he left these negotiations. He kind of storms out and he's like, we just couldn't get to a situation where Iranians were willing to accept our terms. So when you show up with the mindset that Iran is not accepting our terms, when the idea of this whole mediation is that you and Trump begged for this thing to happen and begged Pakistan to broker it because the American markets were crashing with Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz, and how disastrous this war has become, this unlawful war was and was escalating and getting worse. And then you go in and say, well, why aren't you agreeing to our terms? You agreed to their negotiating framework and then you tried to change it up on them. That's like the height of bad faith. Here's what.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the Midas Touch podcast